So you're here probably thinking about how to get rich by investing or buying stocks to make passive income. But before all that, do you know what stocks truly are? As what Socrates timelessly said long ago, the more you know, the bigger advantage you have. So watch this video to learn everything you need about stocks. Learn what stocks are, the different forms of stocks, how to make money from dividends, and the history of stocks in the part 1 of this series. The fundamentals are all covered. Before we start, please do us a favor by liking the video, subscribing, and clicking the bell icon. This means so much to us as it can allow us to provide you better content in the future. All it takes is a second. Alright, let's jump in and get started. Stock refers to all of the shares into which a corporation's ownership is divided. In American English, the shares are referred to collectively as stock. A single share of stock represents a portion of the corporation's ownership in proportion to the total number of shares. This typically entitles the stockholder to a percentage of the company's earnings, proceeds from asset liquidation, or voting power, which are often divided in proportion to the amount of money each stockholder has invested. Certain classes of stock may be issued without voting rights, with enhanced voting rights, or with a specific priority to receive profits or liquidation proceeds before or after other classes of shareholders. Stock can be purchased and sold privately or on stock exchanges, and such transactions are typically heavily regulated by governments in order to prevent fraud, protect investors, and benefit the overall economy. Stocks are deposited with depositories in electronic form, also known as a demat account. When a company issues new shares, the ownership and rights of existing shareholders are diluted in exchange for cash to sustain or grow the business. Companies can also buy back stock, allowing investors to recoup their initial investment as well as capital gains from subsequent stock price increases. Many companies issue stock options as part of employee compensation, but they do not represent ownership, but rather the right to purchase ownership at a later date at a specified price. If the option is exercised when the market price is higher than the promised price, the employees will receive a windfall because they will keep the difference if they sell the stock immediately. Shares: a person who owns a percentage of the stock has proportional ownership of the corporation. Stock is formed by the shares. A corporation's stock is divided into shares, the total of which is stated at the time of business formation. Additional shares may be authorized by existing shareholders and issued by the company in the future. In some jurisdictions, each share of stock has a declared par value, which is a nominal accounting value used to represent the corporation's equity on the balance sheet. However, in other jurisdictions, shares of stock may be issued with no associated par value. Shares are a fraction of a company's ownership. A company may issue different types of shares, each with its own set of ownership rules, privileges, and share values. The issuance of a stock certificate can be used to prove ownership of shares. A stock certificate is a legal document that specifies the number of shares owned by the shareholder, as well as other details about the shares, such as a par value, if any, or the share class. Stock can also refer to completely different financial instruments such as government bonds or, less commonly, all types of marketable securities in the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, South Africa, and Australia. Characteristics of stocks. Shares of stock are typically in the form of either common stock or preferred stock. Common stock, as a unit of ownership, typically carries voting rights that can be exercised in corporate decision. Preferred stock differs from common stock in that it typically lacks voting rights, but is legally entitled to a certain level of dividend payments before any dividends are paid to other shareholders. Convertible preferred stock is preferred stock that gives the holder the option to convert the preferred shares into a fixed number of common shares at any time after a predetermined date. Such stock is referred to as convertible preferred shares. Specific legal clauses may be attached to a new equity issue to distinguish it from the issuer's previous issues. Some shares of common stock may be issued without the usual voting rights, for example, or they may have special rights that are unique to them and are issued only to specific parties. New issues that have not been registered with a securities governing body are frequently prohibited from resale for a set period of time. Preferred stock can be hybridized by combining the characteristics of fixed return bonds and common stock voting rights. They have also been given preference in the payment of dividends over common stock, as well as preference in the case of liquidation over common stock. They also have dividend accumulation features. Furthermore, preferred stock typically has a letter designation at the end of the security. For example, Berkshire Hathaway Class B shares trade under the ticker BRKB, whereas Orion DHC Inc. class of shares trade under the ticker OODHA until the company drops the creating ticker OODH for its common shares only designation. This additional letter does not imply that shareholders have exclusive rights, but it does inform investors that the shares are being considered for such rights or privileges. However, these rights or privileges may change depending on the decisions made by the underlying company. Derivatives on stocks. A stock derivative is any financial instrument whose underlying asset is the price of a stock. The most common types of derivatives on stocks are futures and options. The underlying security could be a stock index or the stock of a single company, as in single stock futures. Stock futures are contracts in which the buyer is long, E, agrees to buy on the contract maturity date, and the seller is short, E, agrees to sell. Cash settlement is the most common method of delivery for stock index futures. Stock options are a type of option. A call option is the right to buy stock at a fixed price in the future, whereas a put option is the right to sell stock at a fixed price in the future. As a result, the value of a stock option fluctuates in response to the underlying stock from which it is derived. The Black-Scholes model is the most widely used method for valuing stock options. Except for call options granted to employees, the majority of stock options are transferable. The past. During the Roman Republic, the state outsourced many of its services to private firms. As individual companies, these government contractors were known as publicani or societas publicanorum. In a few ways, these companies were similar to modern corporations, or more specifically, joint stock companies. They issued shares known as parts and particula, which were small shares that functioned similarly to over-the-counter shares today. According to Polybius, almost every citizen participated in the government leases. There is also evidence that stock prices fluctuated. Cicero, the Roman orator, speaks of parts illo tempore carissimi, which translates as shares with a very high price at the time. This implies that prices and stock market behavior in Rome will fluctuate. Around 1250, in Toulouse, France, 100 shares of the Société des Moulins du Bazical, or Bazical Milling Company, were traded at a price determined by the profitability of the mills owned by the society. Stora, a Swedish mining and forestry products company, documented a stock transfer in 1288 in which the Bishop of Vasters acquired a 12.5% stake in the mine in exchange for an estate. The English East India Company, one of the most notorious joint stock companies, was the first recognized joint stock company in modern times. Elizabeth I granted it an English royal charter on December 31, 1600, with the intention of favoring trade privileges in India. The royal charter effectively granted the newly formed Honourable East India Company a 15-year monopoly on all East Indian trade. The company evolved from a commercial trading venture to one that effectively ruled India after acquiring auxiliary governmental and military functions until its dissolution. The flag of the East India Company initially featured the English flag, St. George's Cross, in the corner. Soon after, in 1602, the Dutch East India Company issued the first tradable shares on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, enhancing joint stock companies' ability to attract capital from investors, because they could now easily dispose of their shares. The Dutch East India Company was the world's first multinational corporation and megacorporation. Between 1602 and 1796, it traded 2.5 million tons of cargo, with Asia on 4,785 ships, and sent 1 million Europeans to work in Asia, outnumbering all competitors. Following the Middle Ages, the innovation of joint ownership enabled much of Europe's economic growth. The technique of pooling capital to finance shipbuilding, for example, elevated the Netherlands to the status of maritime superpower. Prior to the adoption of the joint stock corporation, a costly venture such as the construction of a merchant ship could only be undertaken by governments, or extremely wealthy individuals, or families. So now you've learned what stocks are. What are the common forms of stocks? You've glanced on derivatives and the history of stocks in the part 1 of a 4-part series. Please like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon if you have enjoyed this video. We will be alerting you when new videos on business, motivation, and finance come ahead. Part 2 is coming soon, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching.